The House Oversight Committee just voted to recommend holding Bill and Hillary Clinton in contempt. And you actually had Democrats joining them in this effort, right? Because the Clintons, they refused to testify in the ongoing Jeffrey Epstein investigation, arguing that the subpoenas were invalid and legally unenforceable. Also, you had them noting that other officials have avoided testifying by submitting sworn statements, and since the Clintons provided similar statements, they think they should be excused as well, especially since they say they have no relevant information anyways. But members of the committee from both parties believe that the subpoenas were legal and that because Bill Clinton had ties to Epstein, they should testify. And so the vote to hold Bill in contempt was 34-8, with 9 Democrats joining Republicans, and while fewer cross-party lines for Hillary, they still went in favor with a vote of 28-15. And with that, you had Democratic Representative Stephen Lynch, who supported the Bill Clinton measure, telling Axios that there is plenty of evidence that he might have information given the amount of times that he had flown or traveled with Epstein and since he knew Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, that said, as far as what happens next, right, the big thing is that this is just kind of the first step in what could be a very consequential proceeding for the Clintons. Right, the full House would have to vote in favor of this and then pass it over to the DOJ, but contempt charges could actually land them up to a year behind bars and a $100,000 fine. And while you had Republican Committee Chairman James Comer believing that he has the votes to move it forward, still you had some Democrats not supporting the effort, arguing that this is politically motivated. Or with, for example, Representative Robert Garcia saying that it's interesting that it's this subpoena only that Republicans and the chairman have been obsessed with putting all of their energy behind. And adding, Donald Trump is leading a White House cover-up right now of the Epstein files. And that is, you had Ro Khanna arguing that if anyone should be held in contempt, it's Attorney General Pam Bondi because her department hasn't released the files in compliance with the law that was passed last year. Which, I'll say on that note, Donald Trump and his administration have done a really good job of distracting people, because we are now 1 month past the deadline set for Trump's DOJ to fully release the Epstein files, and we are nowhere near that actually happening, right? Nowhere near close to a full release. And so you had Khanna, who co-authored the bill, calling this an obstruction of justice. And while he and Representative Thomas Massie also took it to the courts to try to force the release along, a judge issued a ruling that's mostly an L for them, right? Denying their request to get an independent monitor to ensure that the DOJ complies with the law and releases the file, and the judge saying that he didn't have the authority to supervise the DOJ in this case. Though I will say the judge also said that Khanna and Massie raised legitimate concerns about whether DOJ is faithfully complying with federal law. And then with that, the judge said that they could file a separate lawsuit to request an independent monitor, and they could use other congressional tools to add oversight to the DOJ. And so you had Khanna saying they respect the judge's decision, and we will continue to use every legal option to ensure the files are released and the survivors see justice. So that's also not where this whole situation ends, because you have the House Oversight Committee actually deposing Ghislaine Maxwell next month. With that, I've got to warn you that right now it remains to be seen if this is actually going to be helpful. Right? Because Maxwell's attorney has already suggested she's keeping her mouth shut, saying this is not a negotiating position or a tactical choice, it is a legal necessity, and saying that this deposition is a waste of taxpayer dollars and political theater, and that, quote, the only certainty is a public spectacle in which a witness repeatedly invokes the Fifth Amendment. And as for any other details we know, it appears that the deposition will be held virtually, as Maxwell's currently in prison in Texas.